Hello and welcome, all you friends, you neighbors, you family, you comrades, you citizens of the world. From Chicago, it's Michael James with another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. This would be number 125 via Zoom since the beginning of the pandemic. And today we have three good guests, and we're going to learn a lot of stuff about elections, etc. We're going to talk with Clem Balanoff of the Amalgamated Transit Workers Union about the elections. We're going to talk with Marilyn Katz about probably elections and more. And we're going to meet up with our old friend John Sinclair up there in Michigan and check in on how he's been doing. Okay, I like to start off with some good things that we learned about this week. One of the good things I read this week, the two men who were convicted of killing Malcolm X 50 years ago, they were exonerated. Not only were they exonerated, but the money that was due them is going to go to either them or their family. One of them has passed on. Another good thing that happened this week was, again, in my class, Activists and Activism, which I teach at DePaul. We had our friend Peter Kuttner come in, and I got to watch some films that I've seen before, but they're always really good. One of them is called Now We Live on Clifton, which really talks about urban renewal and poor people removal out of Lincoln Park back in the day by Loyola University. And we also saw Trick Bag, which is a movie I helped Peter make about rising up angry back in the day. They're both available, I think, through Cartemkin Films. You might be able to find them. Now We Live on Clifton and Trick Bag. Okay, around the world, the good news on this I got from the New York Times is Russia says it will rejoin the deal allowing Ukrainian grain shipments. This really eased the anxiety and the real challenges around food uncertainty, particularly in Africa. Let's hope that Moscow's suspended participation in the deal over last weekend has now changed, and the ships will be moving with lots of grain to feed the people. Also in Africa, I just learned from the New York Times that the ongoing combat in Ethiopia between the government and the rebels in the Tigray region, they have agreed via negotiations through South Africa to a peace treaty. Hopefully this will end. It's been going on off and on in different ways most of my lifetime. Another good thing that we just heard was that Elon Musk Twitter faces an exodus of advertisers and executives. I know he fired a lot of executives, but clearly there's some angst around him taking over Twitter, and he's been firing a number of people. And let's hope that he has a number of challenges before him. I did ride in one of his cars, and I was impressed, but that's the only thing I really liked about it. Okay, another good thing was around voting. We're going to hear a lot about voting today, but some of you will remember that Souls to the Polls, which was a practice of Black churches in the South encouraging people to vote and actually getting people to the polls. Georgia limited that in a number of ways, but apparently they have figured out ways to get around it, and that is the churches are on the move. Let's hope they turn out a lot of people. Also on the voting front, so some of you heard in the last few days that a judge in Arizona allowed for these kind of conservative groups to challenge people at the ballot boxes, to take their picture, to walk around with guns. Well, I just read a report that a judge curbs actions of election monitoring group in Arizona. Maybe the election will get a little fairer there because there's a lot of challenges. In case any of you missed last week's show, we had Katie Hogan on talking about voting. We had Larry Sufferton, who's been on the Cook County Board of Commissioners, talking about his last days there and some topics that were on the ballot around the Forest Preserve. And we also had Win Knoll of the Rockin' Souls on, and it was a fun show. So you can get that at youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos and look for number 124. Okay, some of the best news that we got this week was that Luis Ignacio de Silva, won in the race against the conservative right-winger Bolsonaro in Brazil. So Lula will again be the president of Brazil. There was some concern that Bolsonaro was going to challenge it, that he was going to pull out the military, he was going to really pull a Trump. And while he did not acknowledge his loss, he did agree through his surrogates to the transition. So 2 days after losing the Brazil election, he broke his silence. While he did not admit defeat, his administration signaled that the transfer of power would proceed. That's a good one. Okay, on the sports front, which we are putting toward the back of this newspaper, so to speak, but it's not quite at the end. On Tuesday night, the Bulls knocked off the Brooklyn Nets, who have a whole bunch of problems themselves. Get into that some other time. The Phillies also won, putting them up 2-1 against the Astros. The Sox have a new manager. The Bears took a big loss, and close to home, I asked Jim Canadel, the former track coach at Loyola and then at University of Illinois, Chicago, to talk a little bit about Loyola's victory. So Loyola cross country, close to home. Their aggressive early race strategy on Saturday the 29th served them well all season, and the Loyola cross country squads for both the men and the women, now in the Atlantic 10 Conference, both won in near Richmond, Virginia, Mechanicsville. It's their initial foray into this new East Coast Conference. The women's squad was led by sophomore Nora Woland, who finished fifth. You know, this is a team event, so they actually won with the rest of their team by 54 points. And on the men's side, they won by 20 points. And let's see what I got on that. They were led by Chris Davenay and Ryan Martins, the pair crossing the line side by side in first and second. At a time of 23:59, and Loyola put 6 runners in the top 17 and took the title over LaSalle. And in only his second season as the Loyola head coach, Gavin Kennedy was selected by his peers as the men's and women's 2022 Atlantic 10 Cross Country Coach of the Year. Congratulations. Okay, and on this day in history, which would be the 5th of November, back in 1917, the October Revolution, officially known as the Great October Socialist Revolution under the Soviet Union, the Bolshevik Revolution was declared on that day. Some heavy stuff came down. And just to go out, so you didn't think that the Supreme Court was getting any better, Roberts, the Chief Justice, extended the freeze on the January 6th Housing Committee's attempt to obtain Trump's tax return. That's really disappointing. So we did have one in memoriam. There may be more later in the show. You never know how quickly these things happen. But Jerry Lee Lewis, who was a country singer, rock and roller, the Killer, he passed away this year. And I unfortunately never got to saw him perform. I did go to Madison where he was supposed to play at an outdoor concert. It was really a bust, the event. And he and Doc Watson did not perform, but I remember them leaving. Anyhow, I enjoyed his music, and we're sorry he has passed away. We're going to take a little break and maybe hear a little Jerry Lee Lewis, and we'll be right back with our first guest, Clem Balanoff, the National Political Director of the Amalgamated Transit Union. Stay tuned to WLUW 88.7 or however you're getting this show. We're here on the left end of your dial, and we'll be right back. We're back with more live from the Heartland. Thank you, Jerry Lee Lewis, for that little riff. We're sorry about your passing, but we're real happy now to bring on our friend Clem Balanoff. Many of you who listen to the show have heard him before with both his good and his not so good projections about elections. Clem is the National Political Director of the Amalgamated Transit Union. Once upon a time, he served as a Democratic member of the Illinois House of Representatives from 89 to 95. And now he is just beating the bushes for every vote he can get for the progressives around the country. Good morning to you, Clem Balanoff.
Good morning there, Michael. It's always good to see you.
It's always good to see you.
Yeah.
So now we got to do it. We're not on a Zoom anymore. It's been I saw you last week at Helen Schiller's thing.
Yes.
I got pictures of you and Chewy whispering in each other's ear. So we'll save that for later.
We certainly will. Something I really love to talk about right now.
Well, that's good. I know I've been getting some emails from you with an article about a one-on-one race between Lori and Chewy, and we'll get to that toward the end of our interview. First of all, I'd like you to share a little bit of what you know about the national elections and where we're at. We're getting fed a lot of, for a while, the Democrats were looking good. Now it's all kind of negative and just on the edge of disaster. Where do you think we're really at?
Well, I'm one that does look at polls and to some extent believes them. When I say that, I don't look at one poll necessarily and say, oh, that's what's going to happen. But when you take the average of polls, oftentimes, I think it has some meaning. I think right now, really all eyes are on Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. If we win Pennsylvania, the likelihood of controlling the Senate is really pretty good, because we may lose in Nevada. I don't know, but it's very tight with incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto. We're hopeful in other states. Raphael Warnock, I hope he hangs on. We won't know about the result of Georgia, though. We'll know the result, but that's an election where you have to get 50% to win. If you don't, it goes to a runoff, and the runoff would be in December, similar to what we had a couple of years ago when I spent a couple of months down in Georgia helping elect John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. And so that one's probably going to go to a runoff because there's a third person, a libertarian, who's getting 2-3% of the vote, and that may be just enough to turn it into, to throw it into a runoff. But and some of the polling has Raphael Warnock a little bit behind. But because a number of our Democratic candidates, they've tightened up. Where Democrats had slight leads before, they're now pretty even in many cases, or just up a little bit here or there. I saw one this morning that what's her name? Maggie Hassan, up in
New Hampshire.
I'd say it's New Hampshire, right? Is dead even with her really, really extreme right-wing Trump opponent. His name is Bolduc or something like that. So things are tightening up. Yesterday in the Tribune, we saw that they said Sean Casten's race. There was a poll that came out that was a tie. In New York, it's the Siena New York Times poll, and the Siena is a very well-rated polling company. They, from Nate Silver, get an A+ rating, and there's very few that get that because of the accuracy. They have the race in New York State for governor as dead even, a tie. They also said that in Michigan, it was a tie. So we really do have our work cut out for us. It's a turnout election. Historically, Democrats have had better field games. If that happens this time, we should be okay. But a lot of people are voting early, either by vote by mail or during early voting in these states. And one of the big hopes, I think, is that people will, before this thing has started to shift a little bit towards the Republicans, maybe a lot of people have voted already. And so, it'll be very difficult to tell. Am I optimistic? 538 this morning, they do what they call their election model. And they take 100 different scenarios and things like that. And they say in 52 out of 100 of them, the Republicans would win if it was held right now in those. Now, that doesn't mean it's 52% of the time, but it means that there's, with the different scenarios, and they think it's about 80% or 80 out of 100 that they'll win the House. So, and either or both would be real disasters. If we lose the Senate, Michael, I think we've talked about this. What that really does,
it'd be rough.
The Supreme Court. No, to me, that's one thing. That is why we want to have a Democratic-controlled Senate, because if anything happens to a justice in those 2 years, they will block it, they will stop it, and that's an outrage. Despite, that's just what happens. So,
well, Clem, let me ask you, what do you think about the early voting? Because everywhere, everything I've heard has early voting is way up, and we'd like to think that would tend to lean in favor of the Democrats. Is that a true thing?
Well, it could be true. No, I think we don't know yet. But one of the things about it is this: why are there so many more people voting non-election day? What's happened is it's historically starting to trend up. Less and less people are voting on election day. So when they say, oh, it's the same as it's surpassing 2018, that means that the turnout's going to be up. I hope that's correct. But more likely, it's just some people that will not go to the polls on election day. They'll vote ahead of time. Because of all of the election deniers and things, you would think, and the people being worried about vote by mail or being told they have to worry about vote by mail, or you would think that would be better for Democrats. But in some states, although they're telling people how corrupt elections are, the Republicans, they're also encouraging them in the next sentence to make sure they vote early or vote absentee. So, I don't know exactly what it means. But
What one good thing we saw today was that a judge reversed that decision that allowed the kind of paramilitary poll watchers in Arizona to hang around the ballot box and intimidate people.
yeah, yeah, that's reminiscent of things that the Republicans have done in the past. And then I'll tell you one story about Chicago. Where they put, they make people worry about immigration. And if you go to the vote, or whatever, the Negro might be there. In Chicago, you will remember, because you're like, old enough as I am to remember, they used to have police
Pushing
officers.
81.
What?
Pushing 81.
There you go. Well, I'm only 69, but I'm getting there. But what and Michael is in great shape, guys, for being 81. I mean, this is incredible. As he said, I saw him a week ago. No, but they used to have police officers in polling places. And that intimidates. When I worked for David Orr as the director of elections, I'll never forget, we went on to Harvey because the mayor was a guy named Nick Graves. And he was a former cop, and he ran the police department. And there were police at every polling place. I mean, and it just, some people were intimidated. And that's one of the things, like with these vigilantes around these ballot collection boxes in Arizona. That's just wrong. And it's just, all it can do is lead to trouble. There's no good reason for them to be there. There's just none. I mean,
you're listening to Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James. I'm here with Clem Balanoff. We're talking about the coming election. Clem, let me ask you, do you have a sense of what's going on here in Illinois with the congressional elections? I know there's a couple new districts and some new people running. What's your sense of it? I know you're working hard on it. Katie Hogan's working hard on it. A lot of people are out there trying to shift things in a positive direction.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting, because if people have time in Illinois, there's 3 good congressional races. And if they have time and they live up by the Wisconsin border, they can always go up and help Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers in Wisconsin.
Like Obama has been doing.
Yes, no, that's right. And he's probably the best validator that the Democrats have.
Yeah, he's good.
It really is good to see him out on the campaign trail. You kind of scratch your head and wish he had been out there a month ago. But at any rate, it's certainly nice to have him out there now.
I wish he could have run for president forever.
There we go. So I think a lot of people would have liked that. Because we saw what the result was. Was after he left. It was Donald Trump, and God, we hope he doesn't get a chance at all again. But there were 3 of them that are particularly interesting. One of them is in the 6th congressional district. That's where Sean Casten is the Democrat. And that looked like on paper a good Democratic district. Yeah. And again, yesterday morning on the front page of the Tribune, it said that the race was tied. Now, I tell you, Sean is a tremendous candidate. He's a hard worker. He's raising money, certainly. But if people can get out and knock on doors for him, that would help. Up in the 13th district, which is in Champaign and Springfield and out that way, I think all the way out to East St. Louis, maybe. But it's a downstate district. Nikki Budzinski, she was.
That's a new district, right?
Well, it's kind of a new district. They're all kind of new, but that is one where it was drawn specifically for a Democrat. And she, by what I'm hearing, is doing, she's doing okay. But again, in this kind of year, you just don't know. And one that everybody's concerned about is the 17th district. Now, that was where Sherry Bustos was.
Right.
It's a little bit new. There's a person, his name is Eric Sorensen, former news weatherman in Rockford area, I believe it was, running a real hard campaign against, and I don't know the person's name, the person that ran against Sherry last time and came within, a couple of percentage points of winning. So there is reason to be concerned. And I think it was, who came out there? I forgot who it was. One of these guys was out there. Yes, maybe it was JB or somebody, but but it could have been Biden. But there's so we're in Illinois. Remember, the Democrats drew the map. So the hope is that we can win. Certainly Sean should be a hold, and pick up the seat in the Springfield area with Nikki Budzinski. And she used to work for both Joe Biden and JB Pritzker, doing some labor liaison kind of things. And then up in the Northwest area there, if we can hold on, if we pick that one up, I guess it's not a pickup, but it depends on how you look at it, because we have one less congressional seat. That would really be running the tables. And we'll come back maybe after election, and we'll kind of have a recap, kind of lick some wounds, maybe be celebrating with a bottle of champagne. That would be my hope.
I'm still ready to celebrate. I'm not giving in to this.
Well,
we'll see.
I want you to be right, and and it doesn't make me work any less hard. One other thing, if people want to get involved, all of these campaigns, you can make phone calls for them from home. They have virtual phone banks going almost, like 10, 12 hours a day. So whether it's Nikki Budzinski, whether it's Sorensen, whether it's Sean Casten, or if you have some time, you want to spend a few hours up in Wisconsin, they need people to knock on doors for Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers, or you can do virtual phone banks for any of the candidates around the country. I mean, if you like John Fetterman, get on the phone for him, help him out. And,
Yeah, and if you want to hook up with some of these, you can go to Katie Hogan 70, Katy Hogan 70 at Gmail, and she'll hook you up. Clem, we've got a tight schedule, so I'm going to ask you a couple more questions here.
Okay, let's shift to the mayoral then.
Let's shift to the mayoral, but before I do the mayoral, just a short view from your perspective of why, I must watch the wrong news shows. I see the Republicans in disarray, doing terrible things, being caught with their fingers in the cookie jar all the time, different ways. Why do you think so many people, given the January 6th hearings, so many people still support them?
It's really beyond me. All of the reasons that people vote for Donald Trump, I still don't get it. But there's some people that legitimately will believe anything and everything that he says and the Republicans say. I don't know. I really don't know. But certainly people out there that definitely believe, Republicans and Trump. Marilyn would be a good one to ask that question too, because she's, really politically, there's none better. And she understands, the intricacies of politics and electoral politics and getting people elected. So you're really fortunate to have her.
Let's go to the mayoral election. I think there are about 25 declared candidates. There's a long list. There's a lot of possibilities. There's other people who are not going to run, but someone who's kind of in the wings, and we think he is. You got the news. What's going to happen with Chewy?
Well, I think that all signs point to the fact that he's going to be a candidate for mayor, but certainly in the end, the decision is up to him. We had a poll. It was very, very encouraging. It shows that he is the only candidate for sure that can beat Lori Lightfoot. When they look at, and then they take the undecideds and you look at the positives and the favorables and unfavorables, again, she's underwater by a minus 27 points. That is really, really bad. It's going to be almost impossible for her to be able to pick up the undecideds. And Chewy is at a plus 12. So we're very encouraged by that. He filed a statement of economic interest with the city of Chicago, something he hadn't filed before, but he had to file once we started circulating with the Board of Ethics. And that's another affirmative thing in the right direction. And we have many, many hundreds and hundreds of people legitimately out on the streets as we speak. It's almost 70 degrees out here, knocking on a few doors or collecting signatures at early voting sites or whatever. And it's going extremely well. We start with probably the best volunteer base because of the campaign in 2015 and then his congressional race in 2018. And there's a website, readyforchewy.com. Readyforchewy.com. People should go there. They can download a petition. They can sign up to help in the campaign, and we will contact you. But I think that all things are really pointing in the direction that he will be a candidate. Some have speculated that he might be announcing next week, and a couple of reporters have suggested, why not November 10th? Very historic date for Chewy, because it's the day that Harold Washington announced he was going to run for mayor 40 years ago. And all of us know that he was a part of that historic coalition from the beginning. And I think that, and not only his relationship with the old Washington coalition, but also the people in that coalition that were put together. So I think, if he runs, we're going to beat Lori Lightfoot.
Well, I got to say, I'm not looking forward to a black versus a Latino race, but that is, we like them. I love Chewy. There's things I like about the mayor too. Anyhow, Chewy is a formidable dude, and we could make arguments about why he should stay in Congress. Yeah. We can make arguments why he'd make a good mayor. So we're going to have you back on.
Absolutely.
And Chewy told me he'd come on too.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. There's no question about that. One other quick thing, though, in terms of the kind of campaign that Chewy will run and put together will be a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition. And I think that's the important thing. He's a builder. Somebody that builds consensus, listens to everybody's opinion, and those are sharp contrasts with the mayor. So I'll let you go. You can hear from Marilyn. You're far better than me, and that's for sure.
Clem, you're a hell of a guy, and it's always good running into you. It's good talking to you, and we're going to both be following this stuff real closely, and we'll be talking to each other.
We will.
So thanks for coming on, and get out there and do some more election work.
I'm going to work hard for the next 5 days to help to try to elect a Democratic Congress and Senate.
Right on, and everyone else listening or watching should be doing that too.
Yep.
Okay, you're listening to the Live from the Heartland show. You may be watching it. We'll fill you in at the end of the show all the different ways you can get it. I got a lot of people up here on the screen. We're going to bring on Marilyn Katz in a minute, but first we're going to take a short musical break, and we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. Welcome back to more Live from the Heartland for November 5th. And now we're going to have Marilyn Katz, who is someone I go way back with from the time she was still a student at Northwestern, and then we ended up working in Uptown together with Join. Our paths crossed often. I look to her as a great source of information and analysis, and hopefully we'll get some really good information out of her today. So good morning to you, Marilyn.
Good afternoon and morning to you, everybody.
It's afternoon. You're right. It is afternoon. When we're recording on the 2nd for the 5th.
Great.
So I asked you to come on because, I heard that you had some friends who had passed, and that I heard that from Lynn Orman, and I don't have any detail at all. So how about filling us in?
Well, we have lost a lot of our generation, but last week we lost two really exceedingly wonderful and influential folks. The first one was Mike Davis. And Mike Davis, who you might probably met.
Yeah, he signed me up in STS in the fall of 1964.
So Mike was, I met him just a few years after I met you in 1968. Mike was an STS guy, working class kid out of California from Fontana, who became one of the most influential thinkers and writers in the movement. So he gained fame when he wrote a book called City of Quartz, which is a cultural, political history of real estate, film, politics, and culture in LA, Los Angeles. And anybody who's interested in cities, history, politics, popular culture needs to read that book. But Mike Davis, wrote 8 other books he wrote more, but he predicted the pandemic 20 years ago in Planet of Slums. So he really was of and commented on the urban experience. And his latest book that he finished a few months ago was called Light the Night on Fire, about LA in the 70s. I mean, he's got a tome of work, a body of work that everybody should read. Anyway, one of my closest friends, and what really distinguishes Mike from me, of all of us, is that not only did he never stop acting on the world, but he never stopped thinking and re-examining. And so, many of us are not reflective and self-critical about what we believed at one time or another, don't like to change. Mike was always there. The other person who died this week, Mike had been sick for a long time, was Meredith Katz. And Meredith and I, in 1978, started the Reproductive Rights National Network, which was probably the first national anti-racist socialist feminist group. So when we really talked about reproductive health, we didn't just talk about abortion. We talked about freedom from sterilization abuse, all the things that made it possible to have a child, as well as to terminate a pregnancy. Fair wages, good housing, clean air, clean water. Anyway, and Meredith was also a prolific writer, wrote a number of novels until the end. She was involved.
Marilyn, anyway, tell me her name again real slowly, because I had a hard time understanding it.
Meredith, Meredith, Katz, Tax.
Wow.
And, there's a biography of her in the Nation this week, but she has two wonderful books that are really accessible. One's called Rivington Street, and one's called Union Square. And they're about organizing in New York in the 20s, 30s, 40s. They're wonderful novels.
Oh, I like to get these. I'm going to look into it. Me and a lot of people listening or watching are now going to get those novels.
Good.
Marilyn Katz, let me ask you, what's your take on the mood of the country? I asked Clem Balanoff why he thought, with so much news coming about Republicans doing the wrong thing, and how come they still have as much support? And he kind of deferred to you. He said, it'd be good to ask you that question. So the way we're going to do it is, what do you think is the mood of the country, and where are things at in the last week before the election?
Well, I'm not, first of all, I refuse to read pundits. It's really bad for your health, and they're usually wrong. But there are people who I do respect who spent a lot of time in the hinterlands, and people out there are scared. They don't understand the future. They have a history. They always the country defaults to racism and fear, but the news media feeds that. And I think people feel isolated and alone, uncertain about the future, and don't see anybody really addressing their needs for security in their jobs, for having a sense of the future. And I think that's been true for almost a decade. That's the decade that Trump slid into and gave them snake oil. But I think there's a combination of insecurity culturally, economically. We have three people. Did you read the statistic? 3 people in this country, wealth. I think it's Zuckerberg, Buffett, and one more, equals the wealth of 50% of the nation. What does that mean? It's mind-boggling. Secondly, I think that we see different realities. So we live in the city of kind of normal news. Most people live in Sinclair and Fox News and the local VFW newspaper. Not only do we disagree on the reality and how to deal with it, we see different realities. The reality you see of cities, I went to my eye doctor who lives in the suburbs and who works in the suburbs. He is afraid to come to Chicago. This is a sophisticated man. What he sees on the nightly news scares the hell out of him. And if you're living in Iowa, if you're living in Nebraska, your view of the world is very different. So I think there's fear, and I think there's not enough attention. I'm counting on women and the Supreme Court's decision on abortion to really help us. But the issue of economic reality, I wrote an article a few years ago on the Oreo company moving to Mexico.
Right, I remember.
250,000 people responded in one day. Not one Democrat responded to that boycott. But you know who did? Trump. So we have to remember that while we may worry about nomenclature and whether you're a they or a she or a he or whatever, most people in this country are worried about making their next meal and their next paycheck. So I think it's a very mixed bag. I would point you, and if people want to see it, I'll share it, the memo that Linda Lake and Mike Lux did on what they call factory towns, what people outside of the big 5 or 6 metropolis are really experiencing their lives. Quite different.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if, it's hard for me to figure out how people think the way they do, but that would be a great skill if I could figure it.
Well, the other thing is, Michael, there was a real screw up.
Say that again?
when Barack ran, people organized. When Barack ran for president and won, people organized in groups and they felt very empowered. Once they got into office, for whatever reason, the political structure got destroyed. And people have experienced the ups and downs of the last decade alone. Very reactionary. Makes people more conservative, not more bold.
Yeah, I think too, the national news just kind of keeps feeding us a negative kind of a line all the time.
Right.
I really hate watching it. But it's going to be close on a lot of fronts. This election is a week away from yesterday. When we're recording today is the 2nd or the 5th, but it will be only a few months before we have municipal elections here in Chicago. And I just got off the Zoom with Clem Balanoff, who, as you know, is very close to Chewy, and it looks like Chewy is going to run. What's your take on that, and what does that mean for Chicago?
So I think Chicago really, in some ways, mirrors the country. There's a lot of discontentment in every segment, and I think the current mayor has been a disappointment to a lot of her original supporters. And the city, I think, reflects a sense of disunity. So that you get the sense that, there are issues of we've lost thousands of jobs. You drive down Michigan Avenue, and unlike New York and other cities, storefront after storefront, building after building is empty. And those jobs were not going to people living in Michigan Avenue. Those jobs were in the neighborhoods, in the Black neighborhoods, in the Hispanic and the white working class neighborhoods of the city. Thousands of jobs gone. And crime is really an issue. People are scared. It's just not, Lori kind of blithely says, well, now you're seeing what the Black community has always experienced. That is really not a helpful answer.
It may be true, but it's not the line we need.
Right. But it's also true that in order to really address the issues of violence, one, you have to model good behavior and how you deal with your with differences. And I have to say, the current political leadership in the city does not deal well with differences among them. And secondly, in order to really quell crime, you not only need enforcement, kids need a sense of opportunity. What's their future? And in the last year, we've had shrinkage, not growth, and no enforcement. So I think the field is open. Now, I would say, unlike when we did Harold's campaign, this is a moment where people really are not looking. I did Harold's media and press.
We're talking Harold Washington for you younger people here, who was the greatest mayor we ever had.
And I think people are looking for unity and growth. They want things to calm down. And if you look at who's been elected, Eric Adams in New York, Karen Bass running in LA, the woman in San Francisco and Boston, people are looking for a unifier, calmness, more of a progressive centrist than a far leftist. And that's what's going to win the day. I think we need to really reunify the Hispanic, white, and Black communities and not have a zero-sum game. I think the last 4 years have felt like, well, this community gets that, you get nothing. And that does not, we need to be one city without the contentiousness and without the blame game that's been going on. So I think there is an opening. I can't tell you who's going to win, but I can tell you that, what the polls say is really true. It's going to be, people are ready for something new. Whether Lori can be new or whether it's going to be Chewy, we'll see. But there's a lot of openings. I think that in the end, there'll be 8 candidates. So you want to know who I think will be?
Right now, there's about 25, I think. Okay, well, Marilyn Katz, this is good. You gave us a lot of food for thought. I like the notion of calming down in my older age. Obviously, we will have you back on the show at some point in the not too distant future because you're one of our favorite people. Go
Let me
ahead.
just
What do you
mark
got
your
else to
calendar.
throw in there?
One more thing. Mark your calendars. January 14th, 25 women's groups will be hosting our mayoral candidate forum. And we'll have all the candidates who are still in presenting to this coalition of 25 women's groups. So keep your eyes open for our announcements.
I'm going to look for that. And after the 14th comes the 15th, which is Martin Luther King's birthday on the 16th.
Exactly.
And also Mike McGraw, the Piranha Brothers, on the 15th. I'm the 16th of January, and Muhammad Ali is the 17th. We'll have you back before then. Thanks so much. Everybody stay tuned here on the left end of your dial. We're going to be right back after a little music with the incomparable, the one, the only, John Sinclair out of Michigan. Be right back, live from the Heartland. We're back with more Live from the Heartland. I'm Michael James, and I'm here with my good friend John Sinclair, who I first met in New York City way back in the day.
Way back.
It was on the streets in New York City where I ran into you. You had a long black leather coat. You were running with the MC5 then, and it was just a short little exchange on the street. The last time I saw you was when I was in Detroit following Twin Peaks, one of my son's band, and you were there. We hung out. And in between, you did a lot of stuff. You went to New Orleans. You were at the Heartland, at the Red Line, at the No Exit. Those are no longer. Well, the No Exit's now called Le Piano. But anyhow, John, how are you? It's good to see you.
I'm better than usual.
That's good to hear.
I've had about 5 years of bad health. I'm just getting better now.
When we were setting this thing up, I noticed that you were riding a bicycle. You on that bike a lot?
No, I have an imaginary bicycle, just the pedals.
Just the pedals.
I do 1,500 repetitions every morning.
Oh, that's good. No wonder you're looking so good.
I'm 81 years old. How old are you?
I'll be 81 in January.
That's what I thought.
And you?
81 now on October 2nd.
You're my elder. I like that.
You don't have too many. We don't have too many elders anymore.
I know. It's
when we used to worship our elders and look up to them. I heard you talking about Harold Washington. I felt the same way about Coleman A. Young in Detroit. He was our greatest mayor.
Well, we like them both, and it won't be too long till we both meet them up in heaven.
And they were both Democrats to the bone.
And I'm trying to hang in till I hit 100. So let's you and I do that together.
Me too. I was going to say, last month I went to Lowell, Massachusetts for the Jack Kerouac 100th birthday celebration.
How was that?
It was fantastic. And I got to play with David Amram, who's 92.
Wow.
He was on the piano.
So Lowell, Massachusetts was the site of some great strikes in the old days.
True that.
The Industrial Workers of the World, I believe. Okay, John Sinclair, you were commenting on the mood of the country, a question I asked our first two guests. And what do you think the mood of the country is?
I think it's insanity. I think they're nuts. My heart goes out, as I say, to the poor white people of America. They got all the jobs, they got all the money. 1% of them own everything. And the other ones that don't have anything worship the 1%. They'll do anything for Donald Trump, who's one of the biggest geeks of all time in our country's history. This all started with Ronald Reagan. Remember you were talking about the media?
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan, that punk? Well, he is the one who ended the ban on any one company owning more than 7 media outlets in the country. Remember that? Before Ronald Reagan? You could only own 7 in 7 different markets. You couldn't own 2 in the same market, TV or radio. Now they got places like these people that use my name, Sinclair Broadcasting. No relation.
Right on.
They are in communities where they own 18 radio stations. You can't get a word in other than theirs in the whole area. So that's what's wrong with this, because in these right-wingers, who do you think owns these radio stations? Rich people, white people. And they're using them against everybody else. Where are all the jobs going? They got all the jobs. What are they talking about? They haven't got any security. They got more money than Croesus. You go to a football game and take their family, cost them $300.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty
They got
white.
plenty money.
You know, when I talk to
They don't want
people,
black people or Hispanic people to get any money. That's what they want.
John, when I talk to people, a lot of the times I say, someday I hope that the white people in this country will be viewed as a minority that works for the good of the whole, and that the United States is viewed in the world community as a country that works for the good of the whole. Now, that's a long way off. That's a long way off.
Good luck on that one. I can agree with the first part about white people becoming a minority. That's what they're afraid of.
No, they are.
These people up for so many centuries. The black people, they brought in here since the 1600s. They owned them for 300 years. Now they don't even want to give them jobs or they don't want to give them anything. These white people, they don't want to give the colored people anything at all. I hate it here.
Well, you talked about radio stations, and you did mention that you have a station of your own, even though you're not like a Sinclair broadcasting system.
No, I got my own, Radio Free Amsterdam.org. I'm online.
Tell us a little bit about that, because we got the Live from the Heartland show on youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos.
Yeah, I love this. I follow you. I get your announcements every week.
I send them out regularly.
I like it. You do a hell of a job. And I enjoy this because you and I, personally, as white people, have opposed racism for about 60 years.
Yeah, we have.
I know I have. I hate it. I hate what they're doing to this country now, and I'm on pins and needles about this election because the media has got everything set up for the Republicans. In Michigan, they're running a bunch of maniacs. They're running a bunch of people that should be in insane asylums for governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general. They should all be in prison. They shouldn't be running through. They're awful. And yet these white people endorse all this. I don't get it. What's wrong with them? Are they that totally brainwashed by Fox News? I guess so. I don't understand it.
Well, it's hard to grasp because I watch, I watch CNN, MSNBC. I go online. I get a lot of news, but I do just feel it's always slanted in favor of Republicans.
They own everything.
Yeah, they do.
They own every television station. Is there a left-wing television station in the U.S.?
No, the only thing I see.
Is there a left-wing radio station?
There's a free speech radio or free speech TV, which is really lame.
That's what means you can say how great Trump is and make America great. Make America great again. America's never been great.
Good. Good point.
They stole this country from the people who lived here. They killed them all. They killed all their food, so they couldn't survive. Then they brought the black people to do all their work. And now they're complaining because they all want something. Like them, they want to have what they have. They don't want this.
Well, John Sinclair, I'm in agreement with you on all of that, but I want to ask you about how you've been doing. You fill all of our listeners in, because a lot of people know about you from your early days when you were running with the MC5, when you were starting the White Panther Party. And then you put on those great events, the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festivals. Yes. For many years, you came to the Heartland and performed. Then you went to New Orleans for a while. Tell us about New Orleans. Then you went to Amsterdam. Now you're back in Detroit. What's been happening in your life over that 20 years?
There it is in a nutshell. I was in New Orleans for 12 years. I had the best time of my life. I was on the radio there, WWOZ, the best radio station in the world. And I was voted the most popular disc jockey in New Orleans for 5 years. I don't usually blow my own horn, but I'm very proud of that.
No, you should be proud of that. And you can blow your own horn on my show.
And when I moved there, my kids I brought up 4 girls. And 2 of mine and 2 of my second wives. And when they all got through school, me and my wife moved to New Orleans. We thought, this is our chance. We're free. We can do whatever we want. And I decided at that point, 1991, I was 50 years old. I decided to pursue my chosen area as a poet, a writer, and a disc jockey, and a performer. And so since 91, that's what I've been doing. I wouldn't take any other jobs. And since 2006, when I made 65, I get a stipend from the government every month called SSI, and they pay all my medical bills. So, and I have to live in Detroit because I'm near the Detroit Medical Center. So I lived in Amsterdam for 15 years, half a year. You can only stay 3 months at a time without a visa. So I went back and forth. Now you could go to England, even before Brexit. England wouldn't be part of the EU thing. So 15 years I spent doing that.
And you won the Cannabis Cup over there. What was that all about?
Well, I was brought there initially in 1998 as the high priest of the Cannabis Cup. Cannabis Cup was a promotion put on every year, started by a guy named Ed Rosenthal from California.
Oh, yeah, I remember Ed.
You know Ed, hero of marijuana. And then taken over by High Times magazine. And then High Times ran it into the ground, and Amsterdam pretty much threw them out.
Uh-huh.
They raided their last one that the High Times said. They raided it with 1,500 police because they were ignoring, Amsterdam's an easy place to get along in, but you got to have good manners, You can't be an American thug, and a money. So they put them out. Now they have an impromptu gathering every November. See, it's a thing. It's big for the marijuana business community because they say which is the best weed. And when a thing wins, then the next year, all the goofy white people, consumers, they all buy that particular brand. So that's why it was so important.
Yeah. Well, you came back to Detroit now. Part of that's medical, but you also, did I see something about you started a new business, like a coffee house or a marijuana store?
I tried to open a coffee shop and it didn't work out, but I'm fixing to open a coffee shop again the first of the year in the north end of Detroit. Because they don't have any place here for people like us to go to.
Well,
they only got coffee houses for squares.
I'm really aware of the situation because, we sold the Heartland and they ran it for another 9
years,
but it's a real gap or a hole in the neighborhood. It used to be one reason we set up the Heartland it's been closed since 2019.
Oh, dear.
And it was
love the Heartland Cafe.
It was a great place. A lot of people crossed over, people met each other. It was a place people could go, develop ideas, eat good food. We need places like that. So
community center.
You young people got to open some hip places for everyone to hang out. Us old guys.
They don't know what's hip, though. You got to tell them. They don't know who Miles Davis was. They call themselves hipsters. They don't know who John Coltrane was. There was no hip without Miles Davis, man, period. He invented hipness.
Hey, for the listeners the younger people who don't know, you got busted with 3 joints back.
Two joints that I gave to an undercover policewoman.
And that ended up landing you in jail for 3 years. Yeah. And then there was an effort at one point from John Lennon and Yoko. There's a movie, but it didn't get shown a lot. Can you shed any light on all that events and what happened?
Well, after I was in prison for 2.5 years, we had a huge rally in Ann Arbor at the Chrysler Arena on December 10th of 1971. 15,000 people came to demand my freedom. It was headlined by John and Yoko. Stevie Wonder played, Phil Oakes, Archie Shepp, Allen Ginsberg, Phil Oakes. Did I say him?
You did. One of our favorite. I hung out with him one time. That was good.
Great guy. Anyway, they got me out of prison. 3 days later, I got out.
That's really good.
And we overturned the Michigan marijuana laws.
That's good to hear. So we got a couple of minutes left, I think. What's on your mind most besides the election? What are you talking about opening another coffee house?
That doesn't take much thought. I thought all the things about that out quite a few years ago. It's just finding a place to do it, without any money. That's my main thing, is doing things without any money. I've done it all my life. And at 81, I'm still trying to do it. So it seems to work for me. Unlike most white people, they want to have a lot of money. I don't want to have any money.
Well, I think it's time for me to come up and have a little visit with you. We ought to hang out together again.
That would be great. We had a great time the last time.
We did have a good time last time. Well, you've always been one of my heroes. I loved your books, your music, your poetry. One of the things that was really great in my life was going as your guest with a bunch of Rising Up Angry members to the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival.
Ah, yes.
And I do have some footage of
to my career.
That was one of the greatest events ever
of all time.
Yeah. Do you think they'll ever have another Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival?
Well, they have them, but they don't know how to get people to come. Our secret was to promote it like a rock show. We promoted to rock and roll. Blues lovers and jazz lovers were a very small minority of music lovers at that time. But I managed the MC5 and we were involved in the rock and roll field. We know how to promote So we promoted the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival like it was a Fleetwood Mac show. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So thousands of people came and they loved it. They never heard any of the artists before. They came because it said we were going to have a real good time.
I did have a real good time, and I confess to being in an altered state a lot of the time.
That was part of it.
It was really good. Well, John, if you got anything else you'd like to add as we close out this edition of the Live from the Heartland show, now is your opportunity.
No, that's okay. I could talk forever, as you could tell. But it's nice seeing you, man. It's a thrill being on your show. I read about it every week in my email box.
Well, I'll send you the link.
There. Now I'm going to appear in the next mailings.
It won't be the last time because you and I are making a vow to live to be around 100 years old.
I'm available anytime you want me.
We only got 19 years to go, and we'll be back in touch.
Amen.
All right. Power to the people. I want to say thank you to all of the people who helped make this show possible. We're talking about Josie Staller, who was the program director at WLUW. We're talking about Katie Hogan, who's off doing election work. We're talking Lynn Orman Weiss, who brings us great entertainment. We're talking about Tom Clark, Emilio Davis, and Hal James, our newest engineer and co-producer, as well as our guests today, Marilyn Katz, John Sinclair, and Clem Balanoff. Do good in the world. The world needs all the good that you do, that we do, that I do, that we do it together. All power to the people. Check in with you soon. Over and out.